Speaker is going to be Professor David Hell. I think David has done his postdoc in Berkeley, so and in Peter Abbu's lab. So I think that's pretty good. So let's see what he says about how to do a postdoc.
Great, thanks a lot. So my name is David Hall. For those who don't know me, I'm a new assistant professor in the Robotics Institute working on robotic perception and object manipulation. And I'm going to talk about demystifying the postdoc. So for many people in grad school, postdoc is sort of this kind of mysterious thing. Sometimes unclear what is it, how do you get one. So I'm going to help demystify some of these questions. Before I get started, I want to get a sense of kind of who's in the room. So I'll take a quick survey. So raise your hand if you're not a PhD student. Okay, raise your hand if you're in the first, say, 3 years of your PhD. Okay, raise your hand if you have been in a PhD program for longer than 3 years. Okay, great, so that's a pretty good mix. Okay, so for those who are kind of earlier on in their careers, then this will sort of just be less immediately practical and more just general information. And for those who are in the later years of the PhD, then it will be relevant pretty soon. Okay, so some things I'm going to talk about today. Why should you do a postdoc? Why should you not do a postdoc? If you decide you want to do one, where would you apply? How do you get one? How do you decide which postdoc you should do? And how to be successful as a postdoc. So I'll go through these topics, but if anyone has any questions at any point, just raise your hand and feel free to interrupt. Okay, so as a disclaimer, a lot of this talk, I'm kind of talking assuming that you want to do an academic position, but actually a lot of the advice applies even if you want to do an industry position as well. Okay, so first, why should you do a postdoc, or maybe why should you not do a postdoc? There are actually many good reasons to do a postdoc. Postdocs are great. So here are all the reasons, and I'll go through each one in more detail. So why should you do a postdoc? You can learn something new, you can learn skills to prepare you for academia, you can improve your resume, you can make connections, you can see if you like an academic lifestyle, and you can maybe get a better job in industry, and it's also just fun. Okay, so starting with learning something new. So here's how I think about this. So in your PhD, you were in some lab and you learned some set of skills, usually based on what research topics that lab is covering. Your postdoc lets you really dive in and learn a completely different set of skills. So that can be really interesting. So as an example, in my PhD, I focused on robotic perception. By the time I was done with that, I said, okay, now I know what to do with images, but I can't make robots do anything. So I want to figure out what happens on the other end after I pass off my image processing result to someone else. How are they going to handle this? So I did my postdoc on reinforcement learning so I could get a better sense of the complete picture and learn a really different set of skills from what I had just at the end of my PhD. Also at the end of my PhD, in my PhD I was focused on autonomous driving, but then I decided I didn't really just want to do autonomous driving for the rest of my life. There are there are a very large number of companies all working on autonomous driving. I wanted to do something a little bit different, so I did my postdoc in object manipulation. So you can basically just say what happened you learned that you really want to learn, and your postdoc gives you an opportunity to do that. So why should you learn new skills? There are a few reasons. First, it's just intellectually interesting. It's also a chance to really dive into a new topic. And it will help you understand different types of approaches to solve a problem. So in robotics, as roboticists, our main goal is to make robots do something new, right? As researchers, we also have to come up with interesting technical ideas, but we want to solve problems. There are many different ways you can solve problems. So in my undergrad, I was studying mechanical engineering, so that's one set of tools that you can use to solve a problem. In my PhD, I learned about robotic perception, and my postdoc, I learned about reinforcement learning. So now I have a wider set of tools that I can use to solve any robotics problem that I'm interested in. Other reasons to learn new skills in a postdoc. So one point is that it becomes harder and harder later in life to actually dive into a new topic and learn a set of new skills. Why is this? So first of all, if you become a faculty member, you'll basically be extremely busy. I've learned this very quickly. You don't really have time to just say, oh, here's some new thing I want to learn more about. Let me drop all my responsibilities and go read that and implement things and play around with it. And you don't really have that much time, so a postdoc is a really good time to actually dive in and learn those skills before you become a faculty. If you're in industry, then the main focus is really on making a product, and so whatever you do, it'll be kind of driven by that product, and you can't just learn something totally new. And often, actually, the team that you get placed on in industry would be based on whatever you learned in your PhD. So if you explore something new in a postdoc, then that'll help you in terms of what you get to do in industry. Doing a postdoc is actually somewhat similar to getting a position in certain industry research groups that are more research focused in general, as opposed to other industry research that are more closely tied to a product. So it's actually somewhat similar to working at MSR or Google Research. The main difference is if you get a job at MSR or Google Research, you'll kind of be working independently, and you'll be working in an industry setting. So you'll have less mentorship than you might as a postdoc. As a postdoc, you would get better training for an academic position because you're in an academic environment. The downside is you'll make a lot more money if you work for MSR or Google than any postdoc position will be able to pay. So that's kind of how it compares. Other things. So in industry, if you decide, okay, you finish your PhD, now you might want to go work on some for some company. It'll help you to understand better what are the things that the other people in your company are working on. So for example, let's say you want to join an autonomous driving company. There are multiple teams in this company, right? There's a team that does 2D perception, just computer vision. There will be a 3D perception team, planning, control, user experience, etc. You'll be on one of these teams potentially, say the perception team, and maybe you want to collaborate with the planning team. If you've never touched a planner before, you'll have a hard time. But if you say in your postdoc, I want to learn more about planning, you'll have an easier time collaborating with them, and you could potentially also move up and manage the whole group, and that'll be easier if you have experience from your postdoc with these different types of methods. So it'll help you potentially to move up and manage a bigger group of people working on different types of things. Okay, next is thinking about how postdocs can help position you better for an academic position. So there are different ways that faculty think about who they want to hire for a faculty position. And so here's one approach that some people take. One approach is they'll think about who they're missing, what areas they're missing, and who can fill those holes. So here's, say, like a 2D projection of all the research areas of the faculty in a computer science department, right? So these people here are working on operating systems, this person's doing networking, this person's doing graphics, whatever. And so they'll say, okay, we have this really big hole here. We need someone who's working in this area because we don't have anyone in that area. We need someone to fill that hole. So then you come along, you did your PhD in the area, perfect, you're hired. Not quite that simple, but first order, say zeroth order approximation, this can help a lot. Okay, here's school number 2. You did your PhD in this area, but they actually need someone in this other area. You're less likely to get hired, but wait, you did your postdoc in this area. Okay, you're good. You'll get this done. Okay. So that's so as a disclaimer, though, I don't want to discourage people if you're thinking about applying to faculty positions from applying somewhere just because you think you're too similar to someone who's already there, because there are many factors that go into faculty hiring. If you're a good candidate, they'll still want to hire you anyway. So I'm not trying to discourage anyone from applying to places for faculty. I'm just saying doing postdoc can help you to fill more holes and increase your chances. Okay, so that's one way that people think about faculty hiring. Another way that people think about it is building a bridge. So, they want to connect to, they want someone who can connect to the existing faculty. Okay, so how does this look? So here's this plot again, all the existing faculty. There's you, and some places will say, actually this is bad. You're too far from the current faculty. We don't know how to talk to this person. He speaks an entirely different language from us. We can't collaborate with him. He's doing something completely unrelated from the rest of the school. So for example, I was applying to faculty last year in robotics. There are some schools who don't have robotics, so they might want to hire you, but they want to see, can you speak the language of the other faculty? Can you find points of connection with them? So here's you, you're filling this hole. If you do a postdoc, now you can do more than just fill a hole. You can connect to these other faculty that are doing some area, because now you can speak their language a little bit more easily and connect that to your PhD, which fills the hole. So I call this becoming a bridge to the other faculty. Any questions about any of the points that I've made so far? Okay, yeah.
So if you want to expand your areas, you can also potentially do it during your PhD. So you could graduate within 5 years, so you decide to spend 1 more year to expand your areas. Do you think there's a difference? Do you think it's more valuable to do it as a postdoc?
So I would say that in terms of, so I'll go through other reasons, of course, to do a postdoc. In terms of that specific point, I think it is in some ways valuable, really valuable to do it as a postdoc. So let's say I was working in my PhD group, we were doing autonomous driving and perception. If all of a sudden I decided I wanted to do object manipulation and reinforcement learning, there wouldn't really be, there's no one else in that lab who's doing that. So it's a lot harder to learn something new if you're kind of in isolation. So you need to maybe try to find another lab and collaborate with them a little bit more. But if you're actually doing a postdoc in a lab that's focused in this area you really want to learn about, then you can learn a lot more. So by being in, say, I was in Peter's group for my postdoc, he has 20 PhD students and 30 undergrads who are all working on reinforcement learning. You learn a ton just from talking to all those people, right? So I think that's actually, you know, I think it's a better way to dive into the area and learn a lot about it in a short amount of time. Yeah. Any other questions about things I mentioned? Okay. Other reasons to do a postdoc is to learn some skills for academia. So here's a rough chart of how someone might spend their time as a grad student. So as a grad student, you spend a lot of your time, hopefully most of your time, doing research. Some amount of time you're keeping up with the literature, reading papers, you're taking classes, you're TAing, you're also maybe writing papers, hopefully, you're reviewing papers. Okay, so this is you as a grad student. This is you as a faculty member. So you're doing 10,000 things, trying really hard to manage your time between them. It's a mess. So you're teaching, you're advising students, you're preparing new course material, you're writing grants, you're sitting on committees, you're doing research, you're trying to manage your budget, you're doing 10 million different things. So one way to think about a postdoc is a way to kind of bridge this gap between life as a grad student and life as a professor. What does this mean? It means a few things. You're going to get more practice with mentoring, some practice with grant writing, and maybe more practice teaching. So let's go into that. So as a postdoc, you'll keep doing research, so you'll get more practice with research. And because you're doing it in a different lab from your PhD, you'll get another perspective of how to go about doing research. So in my PhD, for example, we were really focused on just getting the autonomous car to do things. That was kind of the top priority. And then we would write a paper after saying our car did this whole thing. In my postdoc, it was a little bit more machine learning focused, more focused on the method itself instead of the results. So you get to see a different perspective on research that can help prepare you for different ways you might want to do research as a faculty member. You also hopefully get practice with mentoring. So as a postdoc, I mentored 4 undergrads and I collaborated with 2 PhD students. So in addition to the mentoring that I did as a grad student, it's sort of, you're spending more of your time mentoring, you're mentoring more people simultaneously. This is also a really valuable skill to learn to prepare you for faculty. You can also get practice with teaching, so you can teach a course, you can give lectures for a course, and you can get practice with getting funding. This is one of the big sort of mysteries of being a faculty member that you don't really engage in much as a PhD student, but as a postdoc you get to help out a little bit with that, figure out what this is about, and get some experience. And then practice with time management. So remember the pie charts that I showed before, you're doing a lot more things as a faculty member, and so as a postdoc, you're also splitting your time more ways, and you can help practice how do you manage your time between more responsibilities. Here's a quote from Penny that I got about her experience as a postdoc. So she, I think, mostly agreed with me. I'll read it. She wrote, "Yeah, I could have done all these things as a new faculty member, but as a postdoc, I could do these things without the pressure that comes with being in faculty. So I could learn how to write good grants without needing to get a grant right now, because I was still a postdoc and there was no funding pressure. Same with building my network and teaching. I think of the postdoc as a chance to play pretend professor without any consequences of failure." So, so that's sort of a good way to summarize what I was saying. Okay. Another aspect of doing a postdoc is you're sort of improving your resume. So what does this mean? Well, you'll hopefully get more publications. You'll get more letters of recommendation. So if you apply for faculty, you'll need to get 3 to 6 letters of recommendation for your faculty applications. Where these 3 to 6 come from? Some will come from your advisors, say your PhD or postdoc advisors, some from your collaborators, and some from people who you've never worked with, but they've read some of your papers and think they're cool, and they'll write a letter saying, "I don't have any vested interest in the student, I haven't ever worked with them, but I think they're awesome, so you should take them." Okay, but so that's like probably one letter, but you still need all the other letters. So if you do a postdoc, then that's another person who can vouch for you, who can write you a letter, and if you collaborate with people in your postdoc, then there's more people who can write letters for you. Okay, here's another reason that maybe you should do a postdoc. Personally, I think this reason is silly, but I'm going to say it anyway because other people think it, and it's sort of important. What other people think sometimes matters, unfortunately. Okay, so one reason to do a postdoc maybe is to demonstrate your independence. So, so here's how some people might think about this. Some people say doing well in your PhD is just one piece of evidence that you could do good research, but it doesn't show any generalization. So it's kind of like training on the testing set. You showed that you can work in one environment in your PhD lab, but how do you know that this person will be able to do well in some other setting, right? Specifically, some people might say that maybe your PhD advisor just told you what to do and you just followed orders for 5 years and got a really awesome PhD out of it. Personally, I think that's ridiculous. No PhD advisor is telling you what to do for 5 years. You don't really even have the time to do that. You're the one doing all the work. It's just silly. But some people think it. So, okay, fine. So doing a postdoc can help to sort of create an argument against this. If you did well in your PhD lab, you do well in your postdoc lab, now this shows some generalization, you can do well in multiple settings, now you'll probably do well anywhere you go. And additionally, postdocs usually are given kind of more freedom to work independently, so no one expects their postdoc advisor is telling them what to do, so it gives you more evidence of your ability to work independently and to succeed as an independent researcher, to some extent. Okay, so just kind of putting that out there because people think different things. Okay, another reason to do a postdoc is to become unique. Okay, so what do I mean by this? So many PhD graduates look very similar. So I did my research on robotic perception. Many people work in related areas like computer vision or whatever. You're kind of one of many people after you finish your PhD. But if you combine your PhD experience with your postdoc, then you're sort of a more unique candidate. So let's say one of K candidates did research in your PhD area, one of K candidates did research in your postdoc area. If you assume these are independent, now there's one of K squared candidates that did research in your combined PhD and postdoc areas. Now you're sort of more unique, and it sort of makes you more interesting as a candidate and also as a person and as a researcher. So here are some examples of this. My PhD was more on perception side. My postdoc was more on the reinforcement learning side. That combination is pretty unique. Penny, I asked her, her PhD was in HRI, but more focused on the I part, the interaction side. Her postdoc was at CMU. It was more focused on the R part of HRI, the robotics aspect. So that's sort of her unique combination. My friend Aviv, who will be a professor at Technion in Israel next year, did his PhD on sort of theoretical reinforcement learning. He hadn't touched any robots before his postdoc. It was all just purely theoretical. His postdoc was actually working, he also worked in Peter's group at Berkeley next to me. So trying to get things to actually work on the real robot. And so his combination is unique in that he's now actually very strong on both the theoretical and the practical sides. Sergey Levin, who's now faculty at Berkeley, he did his PhD at Stanford with Vladlin, focused on reinforcement learning for graphics, animating graphics characters. His postdoc was with Peter Beal at Berkeley, doing reinforcement learning for robotics. And so that combination gave him the skills to apply techniques from graphics to robotics and find new ways to solve robotics problems. So that's what made him unique. So you can see that this combination can be very interesting sometimes. Another reason to do a postdoc is to help make connections. So you form relationships with the people you meet in your postdoc, and these relationships can be very helpful throughout your career. So if you want to brainstorm with someone about ideas, write a grant with someone, get advice, collaborate, you can use all the relationships you build from your time as a postdoc for all of those things. Another reason to do a postdoc is to see if you like an academic lifestyle. So maybe you did your PhD, maybe you had a really good experience. Well, your postdoc will help you see, do I actually like this, like the things more that I might be doing as a faculty member, and do I want to keep doing this? Alternatively, maybe you had a really bad experience. Well, is that because you don't actually like that kind of thing, or maybe your PhD lab was just a terrible place, terrible environment? That happens sometimes. So hopefully you'll do a postdoc in a lab that's a better environment, and you can say, actually, I do like this kind of thing, and I do want to stay in academia. So I know people who have had this type of experience, and so postdocs can be a helpful way to figure this out. Right, so all these things I mentioned before that you'll get some experience with as a postdoc, mentoring, teaching, collaborating, thinking about multiple research problems at once. If you're working on a project and mentoring a few other students, that's something that you do a lot as a postdoc. So for me, doing my postdoc really reinforced the idea that I should stay in academia because I actually really enjoyed all of these things. Okay. Another reason is that it'll sometimes help you get a better job in industry. Depends on the company, of course, but some companies will hire you into a better starting position after you've done a postdoc. You have a better chance of getting a position at a top industry research group, and you can sometimes have better upward mobility, the ability to move up in a company. Last reason that I should not neglect to mention is, especially following Chris Atkinson's lecture, is that it's a lot of fun to do a postdoc. You get to focus on research and mentoring without having to worry too much about fundraising and all the other things that you have to worry about later in life. So it's a lot of fun, and many professors who I've talked to kind of wish they could go back to being a postdoc. Just forget about all your responsibilities and just focus on some research problem that you want to tap into. So you don't want to miss this opportunity that other people kind of wish they were back doing. Okay, these are reasons to do a postdoc. Why should you not do a postdoc? So there's some. First of all, if you know you want to go into industry, you're kind of just delaying the inevitable. Also, you'll get paid as a postdoc less than you would in industry. So as a postdoc, you'll probably get paid somewhere between 45 and 65K. These are sort of rough numbers. Depends on the place and the city, cost of living, all these things. Sometimes they can be negotiated. I would say usually not, but I've heard of places where they can. And I've actually heard of stories where some postdocs are making higher salaries than other postdocs because some people negotiated and some didn't. And that's not great, but if you end up in one of those kinds of labs, you don't want to be one of the people making less than everyone. So I guess you should negotiate. If you go into industry, you'll be making a lot more money, maybe between 120 and 200K. Obviously, it depends on what job you take, and that can usually be negotiated as well. Another reason maybe not to do a postdoc is in your postdoc you're doing research, you're publishing papers. If you're working in industry, you would actually be working to make a product a reality. So you can make self-driving cars work if you happen to be the one company that figures out how to do that. So that's maybe a reason to go into industry and not do a postdoc. Okay, so just before I go on to the other parts of the talk, here's a quick review of reasons to do a postdoc. Any questions about anything that I've mentioned? Yeah.
I'll add one thing. Reasons to not do a postdoc is there are some academic fields that it's actually discouraged to do a postdoc. Like, so I did my PhD in circuits, and if you get a postdoc in circuits, it's generally frowned upon because they think you just didn't have enough momentum out of your PhD to get a faculty job. But that's because the industry is so heavy in that field that it's very rare to get faculty members.
Right.
Like they think, oh, if you're so talented, you would have got a faculty job right away. Why are you doing a postdoc?
Yeah.
It's like a weird thing.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, it definitely depends on the field. Some fields doing a postdoc is considered differently than others. In robotics, it's generally fine to do a postdoc. There were some people who said to me, "Why did you just apply to faculty positions right after your PhD?" And I told them all my reasons, and they said, "Okay, that sounds totally reasonable. So talk to us in a couple of years." So yeah, but it definitely depends on the field. So if you're in some other field, then look into that. Any other questions before I go on? Yeah.
So would you say that if you're interested in going to industry, then doing a postdoc is not such a good option? Would you say that?
I don't think I would say that. I mean, if you're interested in going into industry, then, I mean, it's not that you have to do a postdoc. I think there are still a lot of good reasons to do a postdoc. Learning something new applies regardless. Making connections can always help you. You sometimes can get a better job in industry, and it's a lot of fun. So, I mean, I guess those reasons would still apply. But, I mean, I guess some of the other ones don't, so there would be fewer reasons maybe to do a postdoc, I guess. That's what I would say about that. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering about the length of time that a postdoc should be to
Great question.
get the maximum utility.
Yeah, I probably should have covered that. That's a really good question. So I did a postdoc that was 1.5 years. That was definitely on the short side. So I would say that was the minimum and probably not recommended in general. Half that time I was spent on my faculty applications, which also take a lot of time, so it doesn't leave much time to actually get what you want to get out of the postdoc. So I would say ideally it would be like 2 to 3 years, something like that. Yeah, longer, and you're probably, first of all, people might raise some eyebrows, and also, I mean, you probably get what you're trying to get, and you should go on and do your whatever you want to do after the postdoc. So, yeah.
2 to 3 years in the same place, or?
Yeah, in the same place. Yeah, I mean, it takes them so I'll go into in a second some aspects about how to choose the postdoc, but generally it'll take you some time to kind of ramp up in this place, figure out how to contribute to this new lab. Then you'll spend some time doing, actually getting a lot out of it, being productive, and then there'll be some time at the end where you're just applying for jobs or faculty positions. So 2 to 3 years is, I think, a good amount of time to get something out of a single lab. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've occasionally seen like people do like a second postdoc and then they've been successful. Do you have a good, or maybe a long postdoc? Have a big feel for how that's looked at?
Doing 2 postdocs or 1 really long one. So that's something that it's not terrible to do either of those things, but it's sort of unusual, I guess. So people might sort of wonder, but at the end of the day, if you've done good work in whatever time of your PhD and postdoc, then it'll be fine. So yeah, I wouldn't say don't do that, but you would probably want to have a good reason why you're doing it, I guess. It probably depends a lot on the specifics of the scenario. So, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll go on and we can also take more questions after. Okay, so now let's say I've convinced you you're gonna go do a postdoc. Where should you apply to a postdoc? So it depends what reason you're doing the postdoc for. It lists a lot of reasons, so let's see how they would apply. So first, doing a postdoc, you often want to do it so you can learn something new. So that means you should find a lab that's working in the area that you want to learn more about. You should often step outside of your comfort zone for your postdoc. So I didn't know anything about reinforcement learning before I started my postdoc, but I said, this is what I want to do. I'm going to just go for it. Dive in, read as much as you can, learn quickly, and you'll be great. So feel free to step outside of your comfort zone. You also want a lab that's working on something that you can somehow think of how that's connected to what you did as your PhD. So even though it's outside of your area, you can connect to your previous background, utilize that background both for your research and bring something to the lab that's new. So you really want to do something new because, as I mentioned before, it could be your last time to really dive into a new area before starting your career. And your PhD and postdoc areas will largely define your initial work of whatever you do after you do your postdocs. You want to think about how that kind of positions you for afterwards. Okay, another reason that I said is you want to improve your resume. So what does this mean? Well, that means that you shouldn't step outside your comfort zone. Just stay in the same area so you can publish lots of papers. So there won't be any ramp-up time and you're just playing to your strengths. So notice this is directly contradicting what I said on the previous slide where I said to step outside your comfort zone. So there are different reasons to do a postdoc, and you sort of have to think about how you want to balance all these different things. So if I did a postdoc in reinforcement learning, which is something new for me, but it took me the whole time to figure out what reinforcement learning is, and I never published any papers, that would probably not be very good. People would be wondering what I was doing for the last year and a half. So you need to sort of balance learning something new and stepping outside your comfort zone with doing something that you think you can actually contribute to and publish. Okay. So also in terms of improving your resume, maybe you should do a postdoc with someone famous. They can write you a letter of recommendation. So I did mine with Pierre Beal. If he writes a letter for you, that's pretty good. Maybe on the other hand, you want to work with someone who is not so famous because they'll spend more time with you and ensure that you have a productive experience. So if someone does a postdoc with an assistant professor and they're their first postdoc that's graduating, that's going to set their track record for all future postdocs, and so they really care about that this person has a good experience and is successful. There are other labs where they have tons of postdocs, and it's kind of sink or swim. Some people are really successful, some people have a terrible time and leave and don't get a faculty position and wish they never did it. So this doesn't happen if you're in a smaller lab, or it's less likely to happen if you're in a smaller lab and they'll pay more attention to you. Yes?
Doesn't it contradict with your point where you said that people want to say that you can work independently also?
Yeah, so you don't, I guess I don't mean to say that that this person would be sort of holding your hand and telling you what to do, but they would be kind of meeting with you more often, asking, you know, what do you need to be successful if things aren't going well, helping you to figure out what you need to make things go well, and just kind of spending more time being there, like figuring out how you can be successful. So, yeah. But you're right. To some extent, if you're doing a postdoc, you can sort of sometimes take a chance with someone who's not going to spend a lot of time with you, and that could work out as well. So yeah, I mean, all these points sort of contradict each other. So there's just many different things to consider, and you have to weigh the different pros and cons of any decision. So yeah, so that's just reality of decision making. Okay. Other things to think about, you want to look at someone's postdoc placement record, who tends to have their postdocs go on to do positions, which are the kinds of positions that you're looking for. This involves a lot of things. They have to be able to write a strong letter of recommendation for you. So hopefully your postdoc advisor will help make connections that will be useful for you in getting a job later, introducing you to people, arranging for pre-interview talks. So for example, in my postdoc advisor noticed I was going to Boston and said, while you're going to Boston, why don't you give a talk at Harvard? I'll email my friend there. I went and gave a talk at Harvard. Turns out they weren't hiring anyone in robotics last year, so it didn't really help, but it was a connection that potentially could have helped. Same thing, I flew to Maryland, so he arranged for me to give a talk at Maryland and Hopkins, which also could have helped. So what you want to do is look at what percentage of their previous postdocs have good placements. Don't just look at the number, because it could be that they have a lot of postdocs who have good placements, but most of them have a terrible experience, and so you kind of want to think about the odds as well. Right, so I also mentioned that part of doing a postdoc is to see if you like an academic lifestyle. So you want to make sure people who did their postdoc in that lab had a good experience. Think about whether you'll have the opportunity to mentor undergrads or master's students in that group. Are there PhD students in that group that you want to collaborate with, people you think you can learn from? Also, a place where you can learn some of these skills. So will you get practice mentoring? Will your advisor let you help to write grants? Hopefully you'll be able to spend a little bit of your time on this, but not your whole time. If you get the impression you're going to be spending all your time writing grants for your advisor, don't do that. Maybe you can help teach a class or give a guest lecture. Again, hopefully this is not going to be your primary responsibility, but only some small portion of your time. Maybe you should do a postdoc at a place where you can make connections. So a well-known school is a good place to do that. I did my postdoc at Berkeley. Now I know more people at Berkeley. In general, even if you're at a well-known school, you have to still put yourself out there and take advantage of the resources. And you can do a postdoc at a less well-known school, but you should then make more of an effort to put yourself out there by going to conferences, meeting with visitors, giving talks, things like that. Last point about where you should apply for a postdoc. Just apply to places and kind of see how it goes. So what do I mean by this? First of all, maybe there's a place that's not quite an obvious fit, but after you go there, meet with people, talk to people, and you see how it actually was a good fit. You should, of course, be honest about what you're looking for. Don't sort of lie about what you want to do just to get the postdoc, because that doesn't really benefit anyone. Sometimes you can Skype with the lab and talk to them before you take the trip out. But in general, I actually found postdoc interviews to be a lot of fun. You get to fly to different places and meet a lot of new people, see what they're doing, and if you're doing robotics research, then hopefully you find it interesting to talk to people about robotics research. And that's basically what you're doing in your postdoc interview. So it's actually a lot of fun. You get to learn a lot of new things. Any questions on this last topic of where you should apply to? Yeah.
So what is a normal amount of positions to apply to, and how many did you apply to?
Yeah, great question. So I applied to either 5 or 6. I can't remember the exact number. People usually apply to say 3 to 6, something like that. Talk to your PhD advisor. Obviously, some advisors will want you to apply to fewer positions because they do take time. But you should try to make sure you're applying to at least 3. More than 5 or 6, and it starts to be sort of too much and kind of unnecessary. So yeah, that's generally what I would say. Any other questions on this? Okay. So now you decide where do you want to apply. How do you actually get the postdoc? So first you have to get invited for the interview. Then you do the interview, and then there's the follow-up. So how do you get invited to an interview? There's a couple of ways. First way is ask your PhD advisor to introduce you to your potential postdoc advisor. If they know this person or have ever met them, they can send an email on your behalf. You'll be at this conference, some conference is coming up. Ask, are they going to be there too? Do they want to meet and chat at the conference? So you'll meet them, and then afterward, tell them you're interested in a postdoc in their group, and then if the conversation went well, hopefully they'll invite you to come fly out to interview. You can also sometimes give talks towards the end of your PhD in different groups you might want to do a postdoc with. This could be like a pre-postdoc talk. Not super common, but sometimes that happens. It's actually a lot easier than you think to get an interview. So why is this? First of all, interviewing someone for a postdoc is itself, takes time, but it's really fun. You get to meet someone. This is someone from another school. You get to meet someone from CMU, hear what's going on at CMU. I hear it's a really great robotics school. What do they do there? So you get to talk about your research. Go learn something new. Then, oftentimes, they'll hire you because you can bring a lot to the lab. You bring unique skills, whatever you learned at CMU that they're not doing at this other place. You can show them our cool ways. You can help them mentor their students. If they have some amount of money, they can use it to either hire a first-year PhD student or a postdoc who already knows how to do research. They'll often use it to hire the postdoc who already knows what they're doing. So it's actually not that scary, and you should definitely just apply for it. Okay, so how do you prepare for the interview? You're gonna give a talk on your research. This is maybe similar to like a job talk for a faculty position. So give the background, talk about 2 to 3 projects, and then talk about future work, which is generally things that you think you might want to do in your postdoc. Make sure to practice this a lot. If you do a good job, it can also help you later to get a faculty job, because they'll remember you and say, I remember this person, they gave a great postdoc talk, we should invite this person for a faculty interview. So make sure to take this very seriously. You should also read papers from their lab, especially recent papers. I sort of made that mistake in some places. One thing you might think is to look at their most cited, most popular papers. That's sort of good to be aware of. But if this is a paper that they wrote 15 years ago that had a lot of citations, they might say, well, we're not really doing that stuff anymore. We're actually doing this other stuff. So you want to know what is the lab doing right now. So read some of their recent papers and think about how that connects to your work and what possible sort of future directions in that area you might be interested in. These are some other tips of just giving presentations in general that hopefully you'll learn. I actually gave a talk and they were drinking water and they spilled water all over their laptop and it shut down. All of this that, you're not going to spill water. Okay. So give to back up your presentation just in case. These are just general presentations. Also you don't want to be the guy who's like pressing the button. Get one of these clickers. Okay, so how do you do the interview? You're going to fly out, you give your talk, you're going to meet with students in the group. When you meet with the students, this is pretty important. A good postdoc advisor will ask their students, what do you think about this candidate? Do you think they're a good fit for our group? So you want to make a good impression on these students. So try to engage with them with their work, ask good questions, maybe try to suggest to them things they might be able to do to improve their projects. And also be thinking about, do I enjoy talking to these students? Do I find their projects interesting? Do I think I can learn from them? Okay, you'll also meet with your potential postdoc advisor. Tell them what you're interested in. Explain connections between what they're doing and what you're interested in. And maybe, and also you should have a few ideas in mind of potential postdoc projects that you could pitch to them. Not everyone will require this, but some will, so it's good to have those in your back pocket. You'll also go out to a meal, and so make sure to participate in the conversation and show that you would sort of fit in with the group. Depending on what you're interested in doing, there might be other labs that are important for you to collaborate with. So if possible, see if you can meet with the people from those other groups and talk about potential joint projects and try to get a sense of would this actually happen or not. So for example, if it's a lab that they already have 3 students collaborating with this other group, that's a good sign that you'll be able to also collaborate. If they've never really talked to this person before and you're going to start a new collaboration, it may or may not actually happen. So try to get a sense of that. Make sure to send thank you notes after. Here are some points about that. And also thank all the collaborators you met with. Okay, so that was how to decide which postdoc. Last part is, okay, so how do you decide which postdoc? So there's lots of things to do. So this is after you have, say, 3 postdoc offers, and you want to pick which one you're actually going to do. So you should narrow it down, and then this is what I did. Schedule follow-up meetings with all of the students over, say, Skype, to ask them extra questions about the group. So really, during the interview, you're mostly trying to sell yourself. Once you have the offer, you get to ask all the questions, basically. So what questions should you ask? Basically, anything that you might be concerned about. Do they like their group? What are your advisor's greatest strengths and weaknesses? Do people collaborate? Do people mostly work by themselves? How often do you meet with your advisor? Similar questions you might ask when joining a PhD group. To what extent you should also talk to all the postdocs, spend much more time with them because they're sort of testing out what your life is going to be like if you accept this offer. So do you have the freedom to work on what you want? Do you get to mentor people? How much do people collaborate with each other? Do they have all the tools that you need, or are they constantly sort of fighting with their resources? How much time do they spend on all these different responsibilities? Also, you should try, if you can, once you've really narrowed it down, to talk to former postdocs in the group who will have a perspective on what it was like to apply for faculty positions after the postdoc. So how much do they help you to get a job, preparing your job talk, and all these things. Yeah. Also, who decided when you finished? So I've also heard horror stories about people who did very long postdocs like you sort of were asking about, and sometimes that's because their advisor thinks you're really productive and doesn't want you to ever leave. So, so you want to sort of find out if your potential postdoc advisor is like that or not. And then make sure to talk to your advisor and ask lots of follow-up questions. Make sure that you're excited about the project, that see if, sort of what your rapport is with this person. Also, make sure you get clear what your expectations for the postdoc in terms of spending time on different types of responsibilities. And then, as I mentioned, you should see if the offer is negotiable. Oftentimes it's not, but sometimes it is. And make sure to raise any potential issues in advance before signing the postdoc offer. So if it's important to you to get time off for religious holidays or spend time with family, make sure to ask about that. If you are anticipating needing maternity or paternity leave, ask about that as well, and make sure you're just totally clear on what are your expectations and responsibilities. Okay, last part is how to be successful as a postdoc. So you decide you want to do a postdoc, you have the offer, you're going. How do you make sure to get the most out of the experience? Start out by reading a lot, read through recent papers, learn whatever background you need to be successful and contribute to this lab. Meet with every student in the group and see if you can form a collaboration. And then try to mentor, I would say, between 1 and 3 master's students in undergrads. So I was mentoring 4. That was sort of a little bit hard to do my own research at the time and mentor 4. So 3 turned out to be a good number for me. So I would say ideally between 2 to 3 undergrads and master's students that you're mentoring in addition to your own research. Also, all the things I mentioned before, try to help out with grant writing, a little bit of lecturing, give talks to all the other groups there so that you can sort of get to know as many people as you can, and make sure you're having fun, and if you're not having fun, then don't be afraid to leave or do another postdoc. Sometimes that happens. So here's a brief summary of all the things that I've covered, and that's it. I'll take any remaining questions that people have.
Yeah, it struck me, I don't actually know, when you're doing a postdoc, are you technically an employee of the university or are you
Yeah.
a student?
Yeah, so actually that's a great question because you're sort of in this in-between stage. So technically you're an employee, sort of like a staff. Some places you're classified as staff, but you often get some of the benefits of being a student also. So you're in some ways treated like a student, but you're technically you have a job. You're an employee, basically. So yeah, no student discounts for postdocs.
I was more asking with regards to sort of the maternity leave and things like that.
Yeah, so usually sometimes schools will have policy specific for postdocs, but generally, yeah, you would look at the staff policies and things like that. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I had a question just about if you go to industry and coming back to do a postdoc, if you have any insights on that, or whether that's done at all, or.
It's industry and then postdoc. I think it's more rare. I have to think more about that. Generally speaking, people who go into industry don't come back to academia because they it's like a very different lifestyle and it's sort of hard to kind of go back and forth between the two worlds. It does happen occasionally, but yeah, I'd have to think more about that question. Yeah.
Can you talk more about your mentoring experience and sort of what things you learned from that and how you learned to be a good mentor?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so some things that I learned about mentoring. So one is to make sure that you're actually excited about the projects that you're mentoring students on. I had a time in my PhD where there were some projects that I kind of was vaguely interested in and I thought maybe I'll mentor a student on, but I didn't really care about the projects too much. That wasn't really great. You want to mentor students on projects that you really are invested in, you just don't have time to do yourself, but you really want to see this happen and care about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. Another thing is to make sure to sort of push students to kind of expect a lot from students, I guess. I'm not sure exactly the right way of saying it, but there was one case where I gave a student what I thought would be kind of like an easy starter project, and he did it, and it was okay, but then afterwards I gave him a more challenging project, and he actually did a great job at that, and that turned into a paper. So you kind of don't sort of, figure out what level the student you're mentoring is at, kind of give them something that's sort of like at the top of their abilities, basically. Yeah.
So
Let's
I guess I was curious, like how much time you spent mentoring and if it was in collaboration, maybe not in your case, but whether it's common to work in collaboration with the advisor.
Yeah, good question. So, right. So in terms of time, yeah, I mean that ties in a lot with the other point about caring a lot about the project. So, I mean, you generally want to spend kind of a fair amount of time mentoring. I'm not sure if I could really give a number on it. Something like 4 hours a week, maybe something like that. I originally thought I'll meet with a student 1 hour a week because I don't really care about this project and I just kind of want to mentor someone. But then they're not going to be that successful, and so that's not good. So if you really care about the project, you know, kind of spend as much time as you need to make sure the project happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could take a fair amount of time. Doing it in collaboration with the advisor, usually the reason that you're mentoring them is because your advisor doesn't have time to mentor this person, so you're kind of going to be mentoring them sort of independently, which is partly why it's actually a really good experience before you become a faculty member. But something that did work well for me actually is mentoring. I mentored I guess I was collaborating. I had a collaboration with me, another postdoc, and a PhD student. So 2 postdocs and a PhD student, but we had very different backgrounds, and that was really great and successful. So that can work out well if you figure out what you're all contributing to the project.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Yeah, maybe last one. Yeah.
When you're applying to postdocs, how important is it that they're advertising openings?
It's not. Yeah. I mean, some people will take the time to write up an advertisement or whatever, and some people are too busy to do that. And you should just email them and apply anyway. So, I mean, if they are advertising for an opening, then that's obviously a good sign that they're looking, and you should maybe try to pitch yourself as fulfilling whatever project description they wrote about. But yeah, it definitely should not ever stop you from applying to a postdoc if they have not advertised for it. Yeah, good question. Okay, so I'll stop there, and I can wait after a minute if anyone has any other